I'm Professor Margaret Rogers Van Coops, and welcome to my show, The Truth. My whole point of this show is to give you what the oneness has taught me throughout my life. Sometimes I'm channeling, and sometimes it's just me talking. But today I'd like to introduce you to this book, The Dark Side. You've got a lot of light here in my house, so sorry about that. The Dark Side. You see this woman, she's in the dark. You can't see her front, but you can know there is light behind her in the back. I chose this literally as a symbol when I was getting this book published, which was done about 8 years or so ago. We need to realize that we've come out of the Piscean age and we're now in the Aquarian age. And there is a big difference, and some of you who follow me all the time will know that there is a lecture on the Great Aquarian Age versus the Great Piscean Age. And if you're into listening and being educated for a couple of hours, do go there and listen to that talk. But here, the dark side, I wanted to talk about all the things that religion and philosophy and theology and voodoo and whatever else you want to think of, is that man has, throughout the evolution of his kind or her kind, had the idea that we have someone looking over us, taking care of us. And we also had the idea that, hey, there's some demons and goblins somewhere hiding in the woods and also in the dark, which might be called the underworld. And there are so many different religions and philosophies, even down to, for example, if you go into Africa, where there are tribes who've never met any religious people, but they have their own philosophy. If we go into Australia, we can see the same thing where the original people before white man ever got there already had their own idea about how God was in them and in the oneness, and also that there were evil and dark spirits. So how do we know that? How did we discover all this over eons of time? Well, spirit guides always tell me the truth when I ask. And so they said, well, you have to stop and realize that you in the beginning were of the dark. And I'm like, well, okay. But then they made the parallel of when a baby is in the womb, the baby has no light. It's in the dark of the mother's womb and does not see the light until the birthing. And in that sense, it is a symbolic thing of growing out of what was into what you will become. So in the same way, if we go back through our ancient history, we can see that we have got Egyptians and people like that who talk about them as being aliens, people who were maybe half human and half something else. What was going on? Well, if we make a fast forward here for a minute and talk about making babies in petri dishes, from sperm that a man has donated in another state that nobody knows who he is, versus a woman who desperately wants a baby and can't get one with her hubby, so they're just going to give her an artificial inseminated egg to put in her body. Well, go back a few million years and you're actually hearing history. Because back in ancient times, according to Spirit, what they told me, there were people from, not Syria, because that is the sun, but around Syrian energy were planets, and still are some apparently. But according to Spirit, the people of that particular area in the heavens traveled to here and in their own way knew how to form a planet. Well, what does that mean? Bringing chemicals, bringing structures, bringing things and creating an atmosphere. Bringing one cell seeds and putting them into the cosmos of our world, as it were. Because all you can think of the earth in its beginning was a massive organic, the way Spirit put it to me, gases all over the place. And when I was very young, seeing all these globs of gases dropping to the earth as balls, and then realizing that they were geodes, and in geodes can be an emerald, can be a ruby, and of course lots of quartz and amethyst and so on. And we use those stones today in healing. But let's go back to the breakdown of anything on this planet. We talk about ourselves as being carbon, but actually we have many different minerals of various kinds in our bodies. And we have many different kinds of minerals all over the earth. And so we know that we are of the earth. But what made us of the earth? Who came here and settled here? Now we have in the Bible that the gods took unto them sons and daughters and trained them. And spirit people talk about this all the time, that we have evolved from those times where we were taught very simple things. But one day my spirit guides came to me and took me in a trance-like state and put me on this planet in an ancient time, so long ago I had no idea when. And I realized that I was not a female, I was a male. I was exceedingly tall and skinny, like a pole. And I didn't have a lot of muscles like we have today. And I'm looking down at the ground, and I'm here because I'm taking note of the mineral compound of how things are forming on this planet. I'm aware of heat around, I'm aware of steam around, I'm aware of some sort of volcanic energy going on, but I'm not afraid because I know that in the blink of an eye I won't be there if it's dangerous. So I'm looking down from a great height at all these little stones and bubbles and things, and I'm measuring them and I'm taking a record of it. And I am human, but I'm not human of this world. In other words, I have flesh, I have eyes, I have a nose, I have a mouth, and I have hands and feet. So in that form I'm human, but I'm not human of this earth. And I know I'm Syrian. And I know that I'm called Syrian not because I am Syrian, but that is the solar system that I come from. So we talk about ourselves as earthmen because we're of earth. Well, they talked about themselves as Syrians from the Sirius complex of many planets that are around out there. Now, I don't know which one they were. It wasn't a part of my trip in that time to be shown any more than this is why I was interested in the stones of this world. So when I came out of that, I was like, wow, to be that tall and to look at the stones that they look so small. And it was about a week later that I was walking along a pathway, looking down, as I always did, looking for stones. And all of a sudden, I saw this tiny little stone, and I picked it up, and it couldn't have been more than 5 millimeters in length and 2 millimeters in width. And it was like a shard. And as I picked that up, I felt like I was this very tall person, and I'd gone all the way down to pick up this tiny little stone. And as I brought it up to my eyes to look at it, I suddenly thought, it's not as small as I thought it was. Now, the reality of it was I was mixing, without knowing it, the memory of this giant person I must have been, and having the same attitude of just how when I bent down from a great height to the floor to pick up one of those stones that looked so small, when I pulled it up in front of me, it was actually bigger than it looked on the ground. So I had a week or two where I was looking out and about at things and doing perspective, and especially as in my art class, trying to question the depth. So if a house is like a mile away and I'm on a hill trying to paint it, I have to make the foreground look big so that the background where the house is looks small. Relationship to size, right? And so I knew then, without a shadow of a doubt, that I had once been something like 16 feet tall and a beam post. And that was something we used to say in England, because when people are skinny, they say you look like a bean post, because everybody used to tie beans to the post and have them grow up on a string. So things that you kids wouldn't see today, because you go to the store and there's your beans all shredded and sorted out for you. You didn't have to pick them or do anything. Okay, so life is different when I was a child and growing up. And so what did I know about tall? Because it was only relative to how tall I was. And at that time, I was only about 4'6". I was not fully grown yet. But in the same sense of being that tall alien, I had the knowing, the feeling of being that far high up in the air, as it were, from the ground. So later on, I got trapped by some naughty boys. We all climbed on top of I don't know what you call them, a portable building that was stuck outside the back where we played, because it was temporary for the people painting the apartments I lived in. You could leave all their stuff. And they left a ladder, and we'd all climbed up there. And I was a tomboy, so I was often with boys. And out of the blue, the boys all decided to get down, and I was coming down after them. And they took away the ladder, and I'm left up there and ran. I was saying, "You can get down, you can get down." I'm saying, "Bring, come back," and so on. And they didn't. I sat there for quite a while looking. I stood up, and I was looking down at the ground, and I was thinking it's a long way to go to jump down, and because my height plus the height, was probably about 8 feet, 10 feet up for the building. So my height and me was 14 feet from the ground as far as I'm concerned. But as I'm looking down, it was like my eyes became magnifying glasses, and I could see stones on the ground that were there, and I felt I was 14 feet tall. So I knew what it was like from being stranded there, and I wanted to jump down, and I was too scared, because that's a long way down, 14 feet. Finally, they didn't come back, and I sat down and stood up and sat down, and finally I decided I was going to jump. And I did. And I landed flat-footed and bent my knees and lunged forward with my hands right onto the stones I've been looking, and picked them up. Even though my feet were burning from the impact, I picked them up and I went, "Wow, they're much bigger than I thought they would when I was looking up there." So I had a lesson in perspective. Now from there, I started to realize I was seeing a lot of negative spirits. Negative spirits are people that have passed over, and they don't know where they are. They're dead, and they're looking for their family. They maybe died in a bomb explosion, or they may have died in a car accident. There weren't many cars on the road for the average people in those days, or maybe a fire or something. And so I grew up from the war. It's now I'm about 8, and war's over when I was 3.5. So I've got memories of war, but I've also got sounds of voices talking to me in my bedroom at night, and some of them sound eerie, and I didn't like them, and I'd hide under my bedclothes, and I'd be scared, and I'd tell my mummy in the morning, "Hey, there's someone in my room," and she said, "Oh, darling, you've got a vivid imagination." And of course, I did see spirits in my room, and some of them were very old, and like there was Pierre who turned up, and he liked to touch all my jewelry and things, and I didn't have much jewelry at that age, but I'd hear him tinkling and touching different things. But I knew he wasn't a bad spirit. But then I'd get another spirit in, and he'd feel like he wanted to suck my neck because of Dracula, because I'd seen the very first black and white Dracula movie. So it was like, "Oh, I'm scared," And so I had that understanding of the light and the dark of spirits. And then, as a result of the war and spirit guides working with me, I evolved to become a catalyst to rescue earthbound spirits. And so on any special day like Remembrance Day for the wars, or Christmas or Easter, remembering Jesus on the cross, and other religions that I knew of too, I'm not going to mention them all because I'm sure you all know them all, realized that whenever I was in the mood with spirit, they wanted me to focus on a corner of my room, and there would become a vortex. And I know you all know what a vortex is because you see movies now. But in those days, I didn't know what a vortex was. I just saw this swirling thing turn into a ball of light. And then the next thing I knew, I wasn't in my bedroom. I was kind of watching from, say, a building, or outside of a building, and not my building, some other building, or I would be somewhere else watching, like in a garden or something, and all these people would be filing through this vortex. They were lined up and filing through the vortex. And I knew, without being told, that these were all people that died in World War II. Yes, Jews as well. Everybody that was killed was being collected by psychics, people like me, being rescued to be taken into the oneness to get over the terrible things that happened in World War II. So I fast forward on that to say that I learned to master helping and rescuing the dark side, and that meant all the earthbound spirits that were left behind. But after that, I started to learn about the beginning of mankind, the beginning of creatures, the beginning of life. And Spirit took me back into a time when we were not evolved into this form. We were one-cell creatures, like being a hydra with tentacles, or like being an amoeba that just flopped around and could separate itself and re-separate itself. And so of itself was a creator within itself. And I learned then that we as human beings have come from the seed of that creative part. And then I knew that that tall 14-foot me had brought to the earth seeds of these one-cell beings. And we harvested them, and we put them, and we rechecked them, and I just knew that every so often. But what was happening in this dark side, these small one-cell beings? At first they were just nonchalant, flopping around like any one-cell thing would do, until they started to bump into one another. And they started to become aware, I'm not the only one around. There's more like me. We're all bumping, and we're getting so many of us, and it's getting beyond comfortable. And there was friction. And in the friction of everyone bumping into one another, there was death and rebirth. And some would come back stronger and bigger. And you don't think about microspec things growing bigger and bigger. But by the time the world was ready for some other form, the things that we call today viruses were this big, like the dinosaurs. They were big, and they had to adapt to the world in the way things were. And yes, the world got hit by a planet, another doesn't matter what, but Spirit told me it was a planet. And that jarred us and moved us into another dimension in the world of space, moved the axis of the Earth, sent us spinning a little bit further away from the Earth, which then meant we could cool down more, and that meant with the aliens coming and going that life could be seeded and more things were brought here to help it recover from the damage of the impacts that had happened to the Earth in the dinosaur age. Well, we can't talk about every century and every evolution, but we can fast forward and say that we know today a lot more about dinosaurs, and we know a lot more about the Egyptians and the giant bones that we found from the aliens as well as from the animals and so on. So it's really in keeping to understand that the humanoid that lived here was not of the type of human we are. But it is to know that we were the essence of the seeding of those originals into a new form. So when we hear that these angels made us beings, it was biochemically in a teepee thing, jar, on their planet and brought here and seeded. And they brought animals and they brought us and they brought other things. And yes, we were integrated with over eons of time, because they can come and go very quickly. And I'm now knowing why they could come and go, because of understanding fluidicity. Fluidicity. In other words, sound vibrations that are fluid in their motions of energy. Your body is solid, but it's not solid, because every little tiny cell is of its own being and of its own energy, has a food molecule in there that I can't think of the word because they're in my head, but it has a little food place where it absorbs the blood and all the things that you supply it with, and then it rejuvenates, and when it gets old it dies and a new one replaces it. So we are constantly rejuvenating, revitalizing our body, and that comes not from the spiritual essence of our soul, but from the dark side, from the original form of procreation. When you think about a baby in the womb and what a miracle it is when it is meant to be born and is here to live, you don't think about every tiny little cell in that body, how the mother grew every tiny little cell. And that's why so many people right now are angry about abortion. But as I explained in my other show, abortion is part of our growth and part of our understanding what makes us tick, how we got here, why we're here, and what we want to do. And of course, with the space age around and us going out into space now, a lot has changed about our ideas about this is the only planet in the world. Okay? But we do have to come back and say this is a seeding planet, and it has been used not just by giants who lived here and brought their knowledge and wisdom, and the battles that they had in fire and brimstone in another time that ancient Indian talks about. And then we talk about the ancient natives Americas who talk about vortices where people could come and go, just like I saw in my bedroom. So I want you to understand that the next key energy to our future is this word, fluidicity. And I've written it in my novel, Regenesis, that I'm writing right now, so that's how I got the word originally, but Spirit are explaining to me more and more about it. So for now, I just want you to know that there are dark forces around. They are from the ancient times. They do still exist in another dynamic, but once in a while they cross over into our energy, our source of energy, our light source, if you like, to wake us up with a sharp bump on your head to say, I remember I was dark once. And as a dark being once, I had to learn to know my space, to know my existence, to appear ferocious or to appear angry or to appear humble in the sense of I want to mate, I want to bond with others, I want to build something for my nature of the time of what it was. And so yes, we have the ancient gene in our DNA. And one day people will see that it's there. But I want you to understand that you cannot delete your anger, you cannot delete your fear, you cannot delete your wanting to be a murderer or whatever, unless you learn that you are also of the light, and the light and the dark come together, and that way you can perceive and see who you truly are and see the world that you truly live in today. So, in the future, don't judge your neighbors. Don't tell everyone that you believe and know the truth when you have only heard it via word of mouth. If you really want to know the truth, go to source and find the source. And that means go to the source of your being and accept and see that you have got all the dark side. You have got murder in you. If you needed to do it, you could do it. You have got the ability to go and cut your dinner of a live animal because there aren't any other animals around, and do it and kill that animal and eat it. There are already people all over this world butchering cows left, right, and centre for you so you can have your beef. Remember, we are in a dark and a light world, and we are moving now, transforming into a new world. And I will do more about that on my next show. So don't judge people because they're angry. Don't be wanting to harm them and do bad to them because they did bad to you. Realize that everything bad that's happening is to wake you up to the reality that we are both dark and light. And so on that note, I'm going to say to you, please come to another show and hear a bit more. Take care. I'm always here for you if you need me. I do readings, counseling, healing, lectures, and I do them on Zoom or on one-on-one. So be well, and perhaps you'll like to contact me one day. Bye-bye.